Hey everyone. You may have seen me in these videos before, but never really stopped to introduce myself. So I just want to do that now as I'm introducing the video that you're going to watch. So my name is Loik Sadashiva. Welcome. You can call me Loik. What drew me to this work and what I like to do is to give language to the hidden thread um, where cultural stories, the stories that we're told and the story that we're telling ourselves, literally shape the climates that we live in, the climates that we breathe into. And that's kind of a work that I've been carrying um, on the back of my doctoral studies in ecological psychology for the past few years now. So that's that about me now. If you like what you're about to watch, please subscribe and share and definitely share what sparks in the comments if you feel called to. So today, James and I explored Chiron in the 26th degree of Aries. And in this dialogue, James showed us how to approach Chiron as a perceptual shifter, um, perceiving reality differently through the theme, the seven lenses of Chiron. And we use the Elven Star and the Sabian symbols as our medium to kind of sense how our collective wound, per se, can be felt differently and open us to pathways for repair, but let's just say return to wholeness during these times. So it's a long one, but I hope and trust that you will enjoy it.
So Chiron today is in the 26th degree of Aries. We're going to look at the Elven Star of that point with Chiron in mind.
So in our studies, right, in Sacred Seven Academy, we've been able to associate words relating to the archetypes, the outer planet archetypes, whether it's Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus, which helps our focus, let's say, in talking about those like the planetary energies in our collective. And now we are speaking about Chiron. So I was wondering, what do we want to focus on Chiron today? That would be my first thing. And is there a way of a wording, if it's not a word, in which we can contextualize Chiron?
I agree. We need to be very succinct when we look at these planets. If we describe a planet with a load of keywords, it kind of means we haven't really got to the essence of it. And I think each symbol should have and does have an essence to it. Now, in the case of Chiron, I think the general public, the general group of people studying astrology have latched on to one of its descriptions and missed the essential message of it. Now, for me, the essence message of Chiron is perceptual shift. So we used to see things that way, and because of Chiron, we now see them this way. And in particular, we used to see something as difficult or negative or problematic, and now we see it as worthy of having, a challenge that we can raise up to. So we turn everything around from pessimistic to optimistic. And one of those things, one example of that is what we consider to be woundedness wrongly is in fact healed as we shift our perception of it. All of our superpowers, all of our abilities, everything comes from the same process. And that is that we have a challenge and we overcome it and we develop the quality and the skill. That's how you develop anything. and you think about, you know, all of your learning from a child, a very young child, all the way through to adulthood, it's always that you've got a difficult situation, then you apply yourself and you learn the skill or ability that comes from that application. You can't get anything for free. You're not given anything. So what astrologers have said is that we are wounded and Chiron will heal us. What I'm saying is that we develop a lot of skills and abilities by having to deal with the challenges that necessarily come with them first. And it's much better for us to focus our attention on the positive aspect of Chiron, whereas most people consider it access to their deepest wound. Why do you think of yourself as wounded? That's like being born in original sin or carrying karma on your back as a burden for the rest of your life. It's just silly thinking.
What I'm hearing you say is this, you know, looking at it from the perception shift. And I like that. You know, I'm always saying that we need to be able to feel our agency to author our lives. So this aspect of perception shift and not looking at us as wounded, it's just like maybe there is a perception, and to look at Chiron as this dynamic way, in this dynamic way can be extremely valuable to look at, okay, the way in which we can perceive influences from outside and how it has impacted us, to where we can go in perceiving whatever that is coming to us differently. And I think this is what you are mentioning here.
Exactly so. I mean, if we think about Chiron, it's a centaur. You know, if you were in the presence of a centaur, I mean, imagine seeing Harry Potter or something, and you come across a centaur, then you see this amazingly powerful, potentially aggressive horse with a man's intelligence, and you're looking at this thing, and it's just like awesomely capable and powerful. And you just look at his foot and say, oh, look, he's got an injured foot. Because that's where Chiron's wounded healer image comes from. He hurt himself in the foot once. But that's not his essence nature. His essence nature is he's a demigod with amazing powers. So that's what we need to do for ourselves. We are not small and powerless. We're amazing beings. And if you focus on your woundedness, you're losing all of that. So yeah, we need to revisit our perception of Chiron.
So how do we, so now let's go into, so is it that we looking at the 7 lenses of that, then the 7 almost would say, you know how I like to connect things. Is it like the 7 lenses of perception shift that we're going through by studying the Elven Star and by exploring the Elven Star of Chiron? How would you see it from the 7-ness aspect?
I would say it's fair enough to include one of the 7 points of Chiron as represented by the wounded individual that can heal itself, but only really because there's a lot of people that think that way. I would prefer to see it differently, but let's just defer to the facts of the matter. Many people do see themselves to be hurt. Fair enough. So that's fine. But the other 6 points of the Elven Star represent totally different qualities. And we're going to look at all of them today.
Okay. So why don't we start?
Okay. Aries 26 is the first point. A man possessed of more gifts than he can hold.
It says that it is about the identification of core wound, right? So almost like what we're talking about it in one's potential as a teacher and healer. So we can look at this aspect of core wound, almost, I guess, collectively, but again, through what we just talked about, not as something that maybe we heard by, but something that has influenced us and that we can perceive it differently. So
Yeah,
I guess, yeah.
the image that I like is a bit like a rubber band. If you stretch a rubber band
Okay.
back, then the further you go back with it, the further forward it goes with it. So each of us has got something that was the major thing that we had to deal with as a child, and it probably still is as an adult in most cases. So that's worth identifying. I'm not wanting to ignore that. I'm just wanting to see that as the best clue that we can gain in order to understand how to begin our journey as a teacher, as a healer, as a helper, as a part of the answer, not a part of the problem. So in this case, a man possessed of more gifts than he can hold, a warning against overstretching. And I think that it's worth noticing that people tend to take on more than they can handle in excellence, whereas actually the spiritual teaching would be, in Buddhism they say, carry a load as heavy as you can comfortably manage. So work up to your own limits, but not go beyond them. And that's what the point is here. It is very unsettling to find ourselves awakened to life as a constant spiritual experience. Rules and restrictions also operate on this level, and we have to relearn what may or may not attempt, what we may or may not attempt. We're advised to move forward calmly with a high degree of caution as we encounter examinations and trials of a higher order. Now, I remember doing this myself when I was in Turkey. I met up with the Sufis in Turkey, and I had an amazing experience, and I was my head was almost exploding with new perceptions. And then my teacher said, "Why don't you come to continue the teachings in Syria with me?" And I can't handle it anymore. I am completely full. I can't take it. And I didn't go. So I turned down a golden opportunity to study further, actually knowing my limits. I was right there at the limits. Maybe later I can do it, but right now, no, I'm not doing it. Now, I think that is wisdom, not lack of courage, not lack of commitment. And I think all of us get to the point where, look, enough's enough. I can't carry any more than this. And if I try to carry one more thing, I'll drop everything. That's quite an intelligent wisdom, isn't it? It's quite unusual.
Yeah, I think it's also this aspect of knowing, extremely there is a knowing of your boundaries. I'm going back to this aspect of boundaries, knowing it. And to know, sometimes people are talking about boundaries, and it seems also to be a negative, right? It's a boundary and all of that. And I think the knowing the limitation of how you can play with others, and at the same time knowing when to stop, knowing where to be you, and knowing to be in relationship. I feel like there is a lot of wisdom in that, and a lot of people are not. I mean, not a lot of people. I'm making a generalization here, but when you're talking about people burning out, all of that, the subject of saying yes when it's no. Um, it's something that almost you hear it every day, and people do not necessarily know how to. We talk about regulation. I don't necessarily like the term regulation, to be completely honest with you, but it's how do we be ourselves, and also and not be more than who we are as well, because I feel that this is also what we're talking about. When we know our boundaries really clearly, very succinctly, we able to be ourselves when we can be ourselves, and we also know our capacity. We can overstretch ourselves, right? So the building of capacities, what also comes from what you're saying here.
Yeah, it's good that you make the point that the boundaries that we need to learn are not only from external problems, it's also to limit yourself with consciousness.
There is also something that comes to my mind. It is like a quote from someone called Marianne Williamson. And she said something that our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, but our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And this aspect of a man possessing more gift than he can hold, I think there is an aspect of power that I feel like sometimes we don't know what to do with our power. So we power over people, we power over scripts in our society, when actually we should use, or if we are powerful, it's power to create, like power to, like we talked about, power to make relationship, to create relationship, build relationships. And I think that we still has not come near this aspect of knowing how to deal with these gifts, which is that we are powerful. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the power that is overdone in the Sabian symbol is hard power, whereas what you're talking about is the development of soft power, or I'm inferring that. And I find that giving up the power of position and wealth and influence on the outer level actually develops an inner power, which is more influential, but very subtle, very gentle, non-coercive.
I think this is good to remind ourselves, because if I look at it from the atmosphere, right, of our collective, I do believe that we would have to deal with power differently, and knowing how we are asserting power, how we are channeling power in a way that really participate in our healing, quote unquote, healing journey, which is kind of, you just have to be holy. It has to be holy, meaning whole. And that's part of, if you are holy, in aspect WHOLE, whole. I think there is something to say about that, and how we can lead towards being teachers and healers by connecting, or starting to examine our relationship with power.
Yeah, I agree.
The Elven Star point number 2 of Chiron, studying ways to perceive reality. So I mean, it's going back to this aspect of perception shift that we talked about earlier. Exploration of the mysteries, conscious communication, communication of consciousness, and counseling of ideas.
Okay. Virgo 30, false call, unheard, in attention to immediate service. So somebody calls you and it's a mistake and you don't notice. It's a very interesting, complex image. And it talks about penetrative concentration of attention. A crucial step for the seeker to take is the grasping of personal self-confidence. This is indistinguishable from faith and is completed by the process of assumption. Faith in oneself is required in order to trust the inner voice of truth and exclude all else from the mind. A distracted mind cannot break through to new levels of being, as it is drawn and torn by the illusions of the world. I think this is a very subtle mystery, not much discussed. That there's a huge amount of distraction going on now, much more than when I was a younger man, because of the internet and false news and so on.
Yeah.
And yet, let's take the example of conspiracy theorists. I'm sure most towns have got a fair batch of them. I've got, 3 or 4 in my little village here. They speak, they rant. I don't have to listen. I don't have to hear what they say, because my focus of attention is elsewhere. I'm not interested in a fearful approach to life. And if somebody starts ranting on at me, promoting fearful beliefs, I just turn off I've got a way of unfocusing my eyes. I've learned as a Sufi practice about how to look at somebody so that they don't know you've looked away, but you're not focusing on them. So I just turn off and I don't listen to what they're saying. And I try not to be too rude, but I'm not willing to have my attention drawn by drama and fear-based promises of terrible things just because it's very, very interesting to a certain category of person. I just don't give that my attention. That's a false call.
Um, for many reasons, because this to me speaks to, we know there is people who are churchgoers, and we talked about the religiosity of it all, institutionalized religion, and how you look at those spaces, which is in the name of being, let's say, devoted. There is an aspect of you so devoted to whatever that you are getting from this bubble that you start being completely deaf of distraction. And I think that this one Virgo 30 speaks to this aspect of, it's no longer about this aspect of devotion. Where do you really put your attention towards? When are you devoted to? Whose voice are you serving? Because it's actually really important, because this aspect of focusing on our attention towards something really is a practice towards how do you deal with distraction. You're so devoted to this that is creating the parameters of that which you don't want to be distracted by. So I think that there is this question of that.
Yeah, one of the teachings in Sufism is if you go to a Sufi teacher and you say, "Could you give me a practice?" The first thing he's going to say is, "Are you receiving practices from anyone else?"
Mm.
And if you say, "Well, yes, I've got this," he said, "Well, then I can't help you. You know, you either give me all of your attention, or I can't help you." And that's because one doctor might give one medicine that would work. A different doctor would give a different medicine that might also work. But both medicines will probably create more of a problem than an answer. So as soon as you're actually decided that you want to follow a given teaching or a given teacher, you really have to blink yourself against the distractions, because there are many, and they tend to diminish your faith and your clarity of mind. You have to be careful about that.
I think, how would you look at this from this second aspects of the Elven Star here?
Chiron's journey
Yeah.
in the current age now is to move away from being perceived as wounded and only a teacher, a healer, towards a much higher representation of his archetypal principle. And we start doing that by like exploration of the mysteries. And if you look into the mysteries, you will find that in every case, it's backed up by certain fundamental principles, one of which is you have to be boundaried. You have to be single-pointedly focused on what you're doing and nothing else. You know, that's present in every system. You have to communicate with consciousness. So if you're trying to communicate by listening to two people at the same time, you can't be conscious. You know, you've lost it. So Chiron's telling us, look, if you want to really move forward and have all of my mysteries, right now, the lesson is don't listen to the bullshit that you're being told, basically.
Oh.
That seems fair enough.
Yeah, I think there is this aspect of it's different mode of communication. It's also it is going back to me to also this aspect of reading, like we talked about for the other planets, reading between reading between the lines now. Like, it's no longer appropriate to just listen to people at face value based on what they're saying, right? The people, the authority of the media and stuff like that. And then now you just have to gaze a little bit more, focus your attention on maybe not even probably what they say, but how they're saying it, why they are saying what they're saying. Like, almost develop that. This is a new way of communicating, a new way of exploring, a new way of perceiving reality.
This has arisen because we no longer have physical contact with the people communicating with. If you're standing face to face with a person and they tell you a lie, a part of you can notice all of the physiological evidence of the lie. And you can also feel it because you're in proximity. That's lost on the electronic world. You know, it's just, we can't have it.
Going to the third point of the Elven Star, rebalancing the heart, healing of grief and loss, deepening appreciation of beauty, loving care, and now it's the counseling of feelings. The second one was counseling of ideas. This third is the counseling of feelings.
Yeah. We've all lost something.
Right.
And that might be the grief when you lose someone that you love and that you need. But we've lost our youth. We've all lost certain skills and people that have just moved on out of our lives. And Chiron offers a new perception about that. You know, if you just plod along doing nothing in partnership with somebody else who's plodding along doing nothing, then that's a life pretty much wasted on one level. Whereas if you're moving and the people that you need to be with you in your life, they have to change because you're moving. So when you are giving something up, when you lose something, there's no call for grief. You've just reached another dimension of consciousness. You need to move up a level and let them do the same thing. It may be that they're moving fast in their direction as much as you're moving fast in your direction. So the idea that we should grieve over lost friends is counterproductive and silly. And even when they die, they're elsewhere, somewhere they prefer to be. And the grief that we feel is narcissistic sort of need, really. We're sorry for ourselves because we don't have them in our lives anymore. We're not grieving for them on their behalf. We're grieving for ourselves, you know. Now, in this particular case, Pisces 4, heavy traffic on a narrow isthmus, interactivity between many people. The complexity of social interaction that creates a culture depends upon the exchange of goods and services, ideas and knowledge. This goes hand in glove with complex movement patterns, which are the traffic of these exchanges. This traffic is a network that carries innumerable resources and journeys in a confusing, potentially tangled web. The tangles can become very frustrating and therefore potentially dangerous at times, so we learn to need to conduct our communications and exchanges with some care. It kind of resonates with the first point a bit, a man possessed of more gifts than he can hold. And here you got a man who's got more friends or more connections than he can actually clearly handle. And it is the case that we have many interactions between people in the modern age that we didn't used to have ages ago. You know, we used to live in one village and only meet the same 20 people in any particular year, you know, very different. And the mind can tangle up, you know, it can get confused about the number of messages it gets. One saying one thing, another saying another thing. Everybody's disagreeing. There's no certainty about what is the right thing to do, morally speaking, what is truth, philosophically speaking. And we have to cope with that. And so Chiron's kind of saying, well, look, find a value judgment here. How do you choose who to speak to? How do you choose who to interact with? How do you choose which of these messages to take on? And Chiron saying, like, work out that, get your perception right. And I'm saying, like I did before, I don't speak to people who are giving me information about conspiracies. It's just not anything I'm interested in. And there are other kind of commercial exchanges that I don't engage in. If I go to a party and somebody's having a beer, no problem, maybe even a smoke, but if they start sniffing something up their nose, time for me to go home, so I kind of draw lines somewhere about who I'm prepared to associate with.
Yeah. I think it really does speak to me. This point is first on the yearning that we do have for, as quote unquote social creatures, to be with other people, to mingle with other people, this aspect of the whole building of community and what is, I guess, what is that entails. And I think in this point, with interactivity with between many people, we see first off, there is a complexity that comes with social interactions, that comes with the building of community, especially community that are nourishing and not depleting um, other communities. So this is sort of where is the standards in understanding what it takes to um, to be in a community that is feeding you. Again, it's this third point is like the care making, relating to this aspect of how you are interacting with people, how you are involving yourself in someone else's psyche and all of that, the care associated with that. I think it's the workings. I see it all the time. I see it around me. People are questioning, okay, who are my friends and our friends or community members? Is my, I mean, that's maybe I'm biased because that's also part of my attention is like trying to decipher those who just friends just because they like to talk to me, but actually community members when I feel probably quote unquote safe, brave to speak, to be. Um, I think there's a lot of that in the air.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the Pisces 4 message is basically there's a lot of people in your life because their interests converge on,
Right.
you're the convergent point. And you're the only thing in common with all of these people. They all know you, you know. Um, and I think that's interesting. Like you were saying, you got this community of people that talk to you, and it each one is a reflection outwardly on what you are and what you need from the inner level. I think that's worth the wisdom of this particular degree is worth considering in that one.
And I think it does a great way of saying that this is also like we were talking about loss at the beginning. It's like when we are, it's a deep. We understand that now the loss of things needs to be shared. It's no longer in the terms of individualistic, my loss, personal loss. There is a collective loss. And now that is now the interaction with people. We have to deal with that collective grief. Um,
There's a poet called
and
John Donne in 1600 and something who said, "Do not ask for whom the bell tolls; it
mm,
tolls for thee." So the tolling of the bell is somebody's dying. Like who's grieving? Well, if anyone's grieving, we're all grieving. That's the message.
yeah. So yeah, space, learn space to hold the loss, the collective loss, but so deeply appreciating like this dance, like holding the if you lost, there's loss. We holding that, and then we also cultivate deeper appreciation with the people around that we can have a way to deal with the grief where the community comes to play, comes in handy. Let's move to the fourth point about Elven Star. of Chiron deals with breakthrough, perceptual shift, radical healing, need for transformation of lifestyle, radical confrontation. Ooh, guess we are dealing with old lifestyle now, like obsolete. This is no longer working for us, and now we need to move to something maybe uncomfortable. See, I would say this, uncomfortable, but it's necessary for our transformation or something like that.
It doesn't have to be uncomfortable. I mean, if you like life to be exciting and fast, I get off on these kind of shifts. And this particular one is Leo 8 we're looking at here, the bolchevik propagandist. And we're talking about change here. The functionality of change, life itself, is described by two opposing forces, each essential, neither more important. The one force, creativity, is matched with and married to the other, which is the force of chaos, of entropy, that which dissolves order itself when it has become outdated in its current form. In the social context, this appears as unrest, movements that challenge authority and the status quo, whether Bolshevik or hippie, violent protests occur and order is shaken vigorously. So yeah, you're right. I mean, a part of Chiron's kind of perceptual shift, if we think about all of this radical unrest going on in our perception, you know, we're just about to get in touch with humanity's biggest shock in modern history, you know, for the last 12,000 years or something, because first contact is due any moment now. And so we're all going to have to discuss extraterrestrials with each other. And those of us that are relatively open-minded are going to find that interesting. But there's quite a few people who are not. ETs don't obviously appear in the Bible, so there's quite a lot of people who are going to deny the existence of them. But there'll be a rebelliousness in the mind against that, you know.
There is this, because again, I think it's old systems trying to hold themselves because of the personal gain that it provides and that it reinforces. You know, this aspect of learning that creativity has destruction in its normal cycle. It's such a powerful sentence because it adds, it shows this aspect of death that is part of creativity. This death, and knowing that is the renewing aspect. There is the renewing aspect that comes after something that is decomposing and decaying. But we are talking about how some systems just want to reinforce itself. They don't want to decay.
Yeah, the survival instinct is very strong, and so on the ego level, I don't want to die, you know, and that on the social level, we do it this way, and if you're not allowing us to do it this way anymore, we as a group die, and that's the same energy. It's just not true, but nevertheless, it's what we consider to be the survival instinct, you know, and it's that which creates a kind of survival which is self-destructive. You survive as something whose time has passed, you know. You're not really real. You're not in keeping with the moment's energy. That's ever changing. No such thing as survival. It doesn't exist. Not on that level, you know, not as self.
You said a mouthful here, because this is a powerful showing of the state that we are in, and some systems that we know of that we would not necessarily need to claim because it's so obvious, but some entities, some governments and institutions who really spread misinformation, disinformation, and lies. And you talked about how if you will look at this aspect of survival as untruth and as a lie, you kind of see how some systems that truly rooted in this aspect of survival is just spreading lies all around, because trying to kind of like stick to whatever that the system is, especially when it's a system based on violence, in many form that cause mass suffering. Not violence that is, sometimes there is violence that probably is necessary, to be honest. Maybe it's a controversial take, but violence that is really taking out mass. It's a mass destruction of people and the likes.
Let's look a little bit carefully at that word violence.
Right.
You know, certain people, I've noticed that sometimes I can do this. If I just withdraw my attention from a person, that's enough to present the message that I want to give. You know, if somebody's saying something and I just look away, I'm saying, no, you don't get to do that with me. Now, if I said a word to that person, that would be violent. It's not necessary to say a word. Whereas if I speak a word to somebody and that's enough, then it's unnecessary for me to punch them, because a word would do. And if a punch would work, then it's violent to use a gun. You know, violence lies in too much force. Force itself is sometimes necessary. And there are occasions when you have to use a gun. That's the world we're in. And so violence isn't hurting someone, it's using too much force to hold your boundaries. It's strong. I would offer that suggestion. So the Bolshevik Revolution isn't really violent. You know, not really. They did as much as it took to get the job done. I mean, maybe I'm a bit naive here, but the existence of a revolution is not necessarily the resistance of violence. If the dictator is using more violence, more guns than you've got, then I can't see it as violent, you know.
And I can join, definitely I can join this way. I'm glad that you put more words to that. And I feel like that would be something that those who are watching this will really get. There is something that I just want to touch on, that you say, like the social context that appears as unrest, movements that challenge authority, the statu quo. In the social context that this appears as unrest, movement that challenge authority in the statu quo. I like this sentence, because again, it just shows that sometimes violence is necessary, but the challenging of the authority and the statu quo takes some form. Sometimes it is the pathway to transformation. And I think there is this aspect of learning how to use your creativity as the force. And I feel like we are almost going to the next point, I think, with the fire worshiper. Because it's a way of dealing with your fire, in a sense. It's how you are channeling and how you are moving your fire towards something probably is going to destroy, but also have the renewing factor of what fire is representing. But yeah.
It's the world we're living in. I mean, wouldn't it be lovely if we could bring about revolution peacefully through creativity and an argument and diplomacy? And that'll be lovely when we get to that level. That's what we'll do. But right now, we're in a world, we look out at nature. Nature, it destroys other things in order to create life.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's look at that then. Fifth point, revisioning of expectations. Major reorientation, realignment of associations, projection of faith.
Okay, so Capricorn 13 is a fire worshipper, and it's to do with mysticism. It is a little known secret, hidden in plain sight by its own unlikeliness, that life is nothing more than a mirror, each of us experiencing it quite differently in our own unique way. Despite this world of delusion being entirely convincing to most people, the student of esoteric knowledge comes to see through the veil of illusion and discovers the greater truth. It takes more than a gentle heart and clear mind to break through the veil. It also takes a passionate will. So if Chiron's representing a vision, a different vision, how it could be if we all focused our attention differently towards optimistic outlook. The fire worshipper idea is saying, whatever you're getting is you externalized. So what you would hope to see in your own life is the chironic vision. In other words, everyone in your life is speaking positively towards an outcome, an optimistic outcome representative of our collective faith. And if you haven't got such people in your life, then you haven't worked it out internally. I mean, it's okay to understand this principle philosophically, that everything you see is you reflected. Therefore, you need to act upon that and say, well, look, that person is a pessimist. Therefore, there is a part of me which is of little faith. There's an imperfection in my faith, or that person couldn't exist within my life. It's not black and white. I mean, they can exist, but if they don't make any difference to you, if you don't, it's just a quirky, eccentric person that swans in and out of your life, it doesn't matter very much. But if they're stopping you from getting what you choose to have, what you prefer to have, then they're in your way. And that's because there's something imperfect about your own faith.
A fire worshiper, there is some symbols that are so great to hold as image. And for me, this one is one of them, because not only it is vivid, you know, you can almost feel it, sense it, taste it. What is that? A fire worshiper, the devotion that comes with being a student of that fire. One of the bullet points of that symbol has to do with connecting to the source, right, as the creative power of the universe. So what we can expect from each other, from this chironic vision of revisioning of expectation, what we can expect from each other is, I feel like for me, is a kind of a return to the harnessing of this of that creative power, so that you can participate with the number, we participate in society and participate responsibly, let's say, we want to use that, to the collective narrative.
I think any kind of worship binds you to other people who are worshiping in a similar way. We hold our sacredness sacred. So if you're actually tuning in to whatever you consider to be most divine, similarly to another person, that's a very strong binding force. And fire is intuitively so powerful. You know, when you go camping, you just sit around and watch the fire, and there's a community spirit there, a sacredness to that shared vision.
Yeah, and it's so funny that it is fire too. And it's when we're talking about the evolution of the revolution, it is also a chironic kind of utopian vision that we can all expect from each other. The evolution of the revolutionary, or the evolution of the revolution in terms of where we are. How is it? How is the fire, the manifestation and all of that? It's just going towards maybe a new way of looking at how that can manifest. I think this is also what I'm touching on with this. And then there's a recalibration of what faith looks like in action, you know. So it will show how from now revolution ways, how we are peaking out of a new way of engaging with our faith. It's like maybe in the way that we are manifesting, in the way that we are holding each other in manifestation, when with this vision again of the evolution of the revolution.
It may, it might be less metaphorical and more actual than we can imagine, because if you have
Yeah,
fire,
yeah,
uh, much of your world's needs are dealt with because
mm,
you can keep warm and you can cook,
yeah,
and you bind centrally around a communal focus. Fire is an incredible element, really. You know,
mm,
we need to worship it, really.
yeah. It's very, 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 very interesting. Okay. Um, so let's go to the sixth point, the Elven Star of Chiron, high level spiritual awakening, learning the power of forgiveness as a healing tool, and then humility.
Okay, well, this is Gemini 11, a new path of realism and experience, adventure. The idea of discovery implies new experiences and opportunities. Having an ability to conquer limitations and urges, we are capable of real creativity, making up whatever we choose, as does an artist with a blank canvas. So this is
Ah,
an adventurous journey into the unknown. It could not be more appropriate, could it? And we're discussing our spiritual attitude, aren't we? Really,
yeah,
the awakening of ourselves into becoming a living spiritual being. And so it's an adventure. It's new. We don't know how to do that. We don't know the script yet. We're not copying anyone. There's no messiah that we're copying. You know, this is something of great interest. In the past, there usually has been an individual that um, brings about a new way of thinking, whether it's Mahatma Gandhi or Christ or John Lennon. Somebody says something, we go, oh yeah, we agree with that, and then we follow the um, messiah or champion into a new way of thinking. I don't get that that's happening right now. I don't know who that champion could be. We don't have one, and we've had one or two contenders over 10, 20 years, but they don't hold. You know, Greta Thunberg or with that guy that didn't quite make it to president. Forget his name at the moment. You know what I'm talking about?
no.
That was a guy who was probably elected and got kicked out through cheating. He became
Ah,
an activist in the climate change world. Anyway, there were
but
sort of leaders
yeah,
from time to time, musicians, artists sometimes, but we don't have that. We're not following any one particular person. There's a collective awakening and a sense of shared values, which are very poorly defined, you know. Yeah, and I just assume that something's coming that would change the game, that we
yeah,
cannot continue towards anything good. We're running helter skelter towards a bad end unless somebody comes in, like the cavalry comes and saves us all from a fate worse than death.
yeah. I think it just very speaks and it kind of maybe I'm also I would say bias here, but it just speaks to the importance of this type of exploration that we are doing. It's a sort of oh, how do we use the Sabian symbols as mediums to expand our imaginative field? And this is something that people needs more of in a way. It doesn't have to be Sabian symbols, but if Sabian symbols be my guest, but in a way, it's just like how do you expand your way of your imaginative field so that you can deal with societal or personal challenges? And there is this push towards instead of trying to look for an external answer and trying to really get stuck and that we talked about this. I'm saying I'm really tuning in that energy of people wanting other people to find answers. And look at us now trying to explore. We don't necessarily give answers, but it does something to our psyche. The things that we are exploring together, it does something to our imagination. And maybe after this call, I would have something to deal with. with the questioning that I had. And it's just based on that conversation that we had that I was able to expand, maybe have a new way of thinking about something that I was thinking before without having someone to tell me, okay, what do I have to do next? So I feel like this aspect of adventure and this in using that forgiveness as a communal healing tool, feel like more and more tuning into the unknown, finding ways, finding things in your life that can be used as mediums so that you can touch and work with the unknown. I mean, yeah, I think this is what it talks to about. And forgive yourself, give yourself, because that's what forgiveness is anyway.
I remember going through this when I was younger, and the logic that I had in my mind was so simple. I was not born to go to work to do something that I don't want to do. That cannot be true. It's just really obvious to me that the reason I've got the feelings that I've got and the urges that I've got and the refusals that I've got are because they're directions. They point me in the right direction. And I, as a Taurus person through and through and through, for anyone to try and get me to do something that I don't want to do, just like, well, good luck. I can't. I don't know how you could. So it never crossed my mind that I would ever work for an employer whom I didn't want to serve for my own. It didn't cross my mind. And it's the same with everything. I just do what suits me right now. That must be the right path. I've got that degree of faith in my own body feelings. And it doesn't seem to be widespread, but I heartily recommend it. Do what you feel like doing. You know, that's probably right.
Yeah, and we definitely share that. I have to say, I feel like we share that. I feel like for the longest, I've been focusing on my education and my higher education because I was so disappointed, which is really what it was with the education that I received growing up. But there is this aspect of I want to be educated so that I don't want anyone, I don't want to be told what to do when in this aspect of being like just an employee. And there is nothing wrong. I'm not criticizing employees. Just want to make that clear. I just feel that there is something that I wanted to just move and not really get to this
All right.
9 to 5 type of thing.
I have to speak up here. Anyone who's doing a job that gives them joy, absolutely not criticizing them at all.
Yeah.
But if anybody is working for a boss and they don't enjoy their job, I am criticizing them. For fuck's sake, get out, get a life. And I know how rude that is, and so on and so forth. But somebody's got to say it. It can't be right if you're not enjoying your life. I mean, day by day, you might have a bad day. That's not what I'm talking about. But generally speaking, I remember my dad said to me once, I said, you know, why are you in such a bad mood, Dad? And he said, well, what do you mean? I've just come home from work. I said, well, don't you enjoy work? He said, well, you're not supposed to enjoy work. Whoops. I'm not going to debate this with you. I just know you're wrong, you know.
I get that. And then at the same time, I do also get when some people cannot really escape.
No, I don't accept it.
Okay.
If you're trapped, it's by your own doing. We're not prisoners in any way other than self-imposed mental constraints. Just deal with it. Walk away, see what happens. And it's not that I'm telling people to do that. I'm saying that's what I did. I walked away. That can't be right. Therefore, it's wrong. I'm walking away. Don't know what's next.
Yeah. The faith in the faith and the trust in the unknown. Yeah, that's brave. That's brave.
Yeah, you got to be brave.
Yeah. All right. So guess we're getting into our last point here. And I'm excited about. So it's the seventh point of this Elven Star of Chiron. Deal with inspired understanding, release of all judgments, acceptance of imperfections, philosophy of faith.
Well, once again, we've been talking about this Sabian symbol before we reached it. Scorpio 21, a soldier derelict in his duty, conscientious objection, or
Mm,
to put it in my words, if it ain't right, it's wrong. Yeah. We are tested to find out how deep and authentic is our conscience. There is no escaping this, because spiritual values are at variance with the values of society to a significant degree. This is particularly true of armed conflict, where normally the individual is forbidden to commit acts of violence because it is morally wrong, but the state may demand it of its citizens because it is said to be right when defending the nation, even at times when the nation is not under attack. When tested on issues of conscience, it is good to reflect upon the spiritual benefit of standing on matters of principle. So, I mean, this is the test of all tests, isn't it? We're in the seventh point of Chiron. What's Chiron's spiritual message? And you know what I'm saying is, like, if it ain't right, it's wrong, and it does take courage. It you can't walk away from security and comforts without feeling a bit of a pang of doubt about whether you're going to ever eat again or get somewhere nice to sleep or be accepted by your friends. You know, that is a pang, and you have to have the courage of your convictions. And if you don't have convictions, you know, then it's hard to have courage that comes from conviction. You know, you have to have conviction, and that is that doing the right thing works. The world is filled with lies. That's wrong. I'll tell the truth, at least. You know, you have to follow your own beliefs to the point where it's uncomfortable, and then just break through and find a way to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Strangely, you usually walk that path alone. That's the truth of the matter. Or for a while you do, and then you meet up with other marginals who are also kind of walking alone and are glad for a bit of company. But you know, the marginals are actually meeting each other at special gatherings nowadays, which didn't used to be the case when I was a boy. So what about you, Loik?
being true.
If
I mean,
if you were
yeah.
called up, would you go to war or not?
What you mean?
If you were required to fight to defend your nation, would
Yeah,
you pick up
I'm going to war. I mean, I am. Yeah.
yeah, that's a big question.
Because it's not. It's actually really is about being true to who you are. I think you need to be able to want to die for doing something that you if you're being true to who you are, you being true to who you are to the fullest. It's not a halfway thing, and it's your presence. I mean, we are going to physically die anyway. So, which if you're going to fight for something, you fight for that for the in the fullest of your capacity, because it's what you're here for. I mean, you might not be successful, but it's not really about success. It's about like moving the needle forward. I mean, that's where my mind went when you asked that question.
And I'm sure there's a lot of Ukrainian men are delighting in that answer. I have nothing but admiration for the way that country has defended itself. And I know other people, actually a Lithuanian guy who's exactly like you. Yeah, of course I'll fight for my country. You must, you know. Um, I don't have a country worth fighting for, sadly. You know, I'm very embarrassed about my nationality because of the things my government has done in my name, which I heartily disagree with. So it's a bit
I
different.
don't. I mean, don't get me wrong. You're talking about. I'm not fighting for quote unquote friends. Um, but I'm coming from a people who
Yeah.
definitely need something. So that's definitely that. And I feel like it's a collective. I mean, the thing is that it's not even fighting for one nation. I mean, if I'm fighting for Guadeloupe, knowing if I'm being true to myself, I will fight for Congo the same way I will fight for Palestine if I'm being honest. And so there's different type of communities that are in the margins that I feel like worth fighting for because of what they are. So it's coming back to also this aspect of knowing that I'm powerful, that we are powerful beyond measure, and to not fear that. And there is more power in the collective than anything, and understand how through this journey of Chiron, even for me, what I'm getting from this is that there is somehow a way that you can, your presence can, has force, right? We're talking about force, the fire, it has force, but how is it, how can you magnetize and how can you draw people not by force but just by kind of like being truthful, being true to who you are?
I think that we need to follow other role models, and there have been such models in history who made changes of a permanent nature in using non-violent methods. Christ and Gandhi are the two obvious ones. John Lennon, perhaps. Um, Martin Luther King. So, like very often, the big names they've actually not picked up a gun, and they've done it through words and influence.
There is something that comes to my mind vividly here, and we talked about this actually yesterday. There is an inherent revolution to be fully who you are. I think this aspect of when we're talking about Chiron is like of healing. It's less about healing, more about being whole, being who you are in the world. That's actually extremely difficult because I don't think that a lot of people are truly being who they are in the world. They're being what they're told they're allowed to be.
Yeah, exactly. The revolution has to be internal. You have to say, no, I'm not playing your silly game. I'm not that small. You have to say that. And the reason why you think of yourself as small is because you think of yourself as small.
Right.
Maybe a reason for that thought, but that's the rescue where you have to claim agency at an audacious level. You have to be audacious, I think, to claim freedom in today's circumstances.
And I think that we understand through this exploration, there is an aspect of the concentration, right? The concentration of attention. What are you devoted to? The voice that you're following, the creativity that comes for you, the fire that has creative power. There is something that, in order to be the soldier, the relict of his duty, this kind of presence, magnetic presence. Yeah, there's, like you said, the internal way of dealing with it.
And when you get to access that, your own highest power, society can't stop you. The individual will always be able to defeat the group if the individual is in an awakened state, and the group, then it's consciousness that wins any battle.
You've been able in this with the Scorpio 21, the soldier derelict of this duty, to look at that symbol of less of a fear thing, because that can be really fearful. But when you look at it from the side expression, there is so much power, so much. It's so freeing. It's a symbol that can actually be responsible for freeing yourself. And I think this is the first time that I'm actually looking at that symbol as, yeah, conscientious objection. Yes, there is, you don't have to fear that. You don't have to fear it.
It's because it's conscientious that
yes.
It's rooted in consciousness.
Yeah.
It's aligned with your conscience. It's all the same energy field. And
Yeah, because yeah, that exactly. Because sometimes you can object. People are rejecting things all the time. I'm not object. I mean, actually, I mean, not mature expression of the fire and the not mature of the power that lies within you is to this aspect of objecting everything. It's just no. Say, but the I guess like you said, is an attuned objection. Is a lot of mastery in this in there, isn't it?
Oh yeah, this is the path of mastery.